Florida Live starts now.
Well, good afternoon to you and welcome into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer and thanks for joining us on this Monday afternoon live on Fox Local and on YouTube. I want to go ahead and give you a live look right there at Cape Canaveral from our launch credit union camera, where a expected launch this afternoon from of a ULA Atlas V rocket supposed to send Amazon's second Project Kuiper mission, a batch of satellites up into space, has been delayed again. Some sort of issue with that. It did not happen, so a new launch time has not yet been announced for that. Coming up later in our show here on Florida Live, we are going to hear from some officials with the Orlando Dreamers who were speaking to the International Drive Chamber of Commerce today, talking about the push to bring Major League Baseball to Orlando. We heard from some of the bigwigs with that organization, the MLB ambassador Barry Larkin, the owner of the team, of what would be the team, Rick Workman, spoke, and also Jim Schnorf, who's the COO. So the first time all of these principals have kind of made an appearance together to talk about that push. We'll have more on that coming up in just a little bit. A Tampa hospital getting a special visitor. We're going to talk about that in our Tampa Connection coming up in just a few minutes. That's all I'm going to say. If you ask me who it is, I would just leave a blank space. That's all I'm going to say. Make of that what you will. We'll talk about that with Nancy in just a few minutes. Today, also wrapping up a weekend full of visits of the Pulse Nightclub site. On just a few days now after the 9th anniversary of that shooting that killed 49 people, injured 53 others. Today, media, some reporters and anchors had the chance to go inside there. We're going to talk with a couple of folks here at Fox 35, Amy Kaufeldt, John Brown, longtime anchors here who went inside. We're going to talk about what they saw, what they felt, and all of that in just a little bit. But we begin this afternoon with a huge national story, new updates as we continue to learn more about the suspect in the shooting of two state lawmakers in Minnesota.
It is no exaggeration to say that his crimes are the stuff of nightmares. Boelter stalked his victims like prey. He went to their homes, held them out as a police officer, and shot them in cold blood.
Frightening details out of Minnesota after the manhunt comes to an end for the suspect, 57-year-old Vance Boelter, who is charged with second-degree murder and second-degree attempted murder at the state level, now facing federal charges as well. In fact, we learned today from the U.S. Attorney's Office that the federal death penalty is on the table. We are anticipating that suspect to make his first appearance in federal court in about 30 minutes in Minnesota. But I want to play for you, as we learned today, some more details about these suspects' alleged actions. This is from a news conference just a little bit ago from federal prosecutors in Minnesota.
In the early morning hours of June 14th, Boelter went to the homes of 4 Minnesota state politicians with the intent to kill them. Boelter first traveled to the home of Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman in Champlin, Minnesota. Boelter arrived at the senator's home disguised as a police officer. He arrived in a black SUV with emergency lights turned on and with a license plate that read police. Boelter wore a black tactical vest and body armor. He carried a flashlight and a Beretta 9mm handgun. He also wore a hyper-realistic silicone mask. Senator Hoffman had a security camera. I've seen the footage. In the early morning, silicone mask. Senator Hoffman had a security camera. I've seen the footage from that camera, and it is chilling. Boelter knocked on Senator Hoffman's front door and repeatedly shouted, "This is the police, open the door." Senator Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, came to the door. When they opened the door, Boelter shined the flashlight in their faces and said there had been a shooting reported in the house. Boelter asked if they had any weapons. When Boelter lowered his flashlight, which he had shined in their face, they realized that he was not a police officer. They shouted out, "You're not a cop. You're not a police officer." Boelter then announced, "This is a robbery," and forced himself into their home. When Senator Hoffman attempted to push Boelter out and stop him from entering his home, Boelter shot him repeatedly. Boelter then shot Miss Hoffman repeatedly. Boelter fled the scene, and the Hoffman's daughter called 911. Unfortunately, the Hoffmans survived, although they remain hospitalized. After shooting Senator Hoffman and his wife, Boelter traveled to the home of another Minnesota state representative in Maple Grove, Minnesota. Video surveillance showed that Boelter rang the doorbell at the state representative's house at approximately 2:24 a.m. on Friday night. Again, he was dressed as a law enforcement officer, wearing a tactical vest and body armor, carrying a handgun and a flashlight, and wearing that same hyper-realistic silicone mask. Again, the images, as you can see on the screen, are haunting. Now, fortunately, the state representative was not home. She and her family were gone on vacation, and so Boelter left. Boelter then traveled to the home of a Minnesota state senator who lived in New Hope, Minnesota. He parked in the street in that same black SUV with the police license plate. At about 2:36 a.m. on Friday night, after learning of the shooting of Senator Hoffman, New Hope police dispatched an officer to conduct a wellness check on the state senator who lived in New Hope. When the New Hope officer arrived at the scene, she saw Boelter's black SUV parked down the block with the lights on. The New Hope police officer believed that Boelter was a police officer who had been dispatched to the scene to check on the status of the state senator. The New Hope police officer pulled up next to Boelter in his car, rolled down her window, and attempted to speak with him. Boelter did not respond. According to the officer, he just sat there and stared straight ahead. So the New Hope police officer, who had been dispatched to the scene, proceeded to the state senator's home, and she waited for other law enforcement to arrive. When they did, by the time they did, Boelter had left the scene. Boelter then traveled to Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, in the home of Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman. At approximately 3:30 a.m., Boelter arrived at Representative Hortman's house in his black SUV with the police license plates. He parked in the driveway and left the emergency lights on his SUV flashing, as if he was a police officer. Boelter approached Representative Hortman's home, again dressed as a police officer, wearing the tactical vest and body armor, and wearing that hyper-realistic mask. He was armed and carrying a flashlight. Before he entered the home, 2 Brooklyn Park police officers arrived at the scene. They too had been dispatched to check on Representative Hortman after learning of the shooting of Senator Hoffman. When they arrived at the scene, they saw Boelter's black SUV parked in the driveway with the emergency lights flashing, and they saw Boelter standing in front of the house several feet from the door. When Boelter saw the officers get out of the car, he drew his weapon and began firing. He rushed into the house through the front door, firing into it. He repeatedly fired into the house, and when he entered, he murdered Representative Hortman and her husband, Mark. The Brooklyn Park police officers fired at Boelter as he rushed into the home, but he escaped into the home and out the back. Boelter planned his attack carefully. He researched his victims and their families. He used the internet and other tools to find their addresses and names, the names of their family members. He conducted surveillance of their homes and took notes about the location of their homes. He also prepared in other ways. He concealed himself as a police officer outfitting his black SUV with police lights and a police license plate, wearing a black tactical vest and body armor, carrying a police flashlight and a handgun. And of course, he wore that hyper-realistic silicone mask as seen on the surveillance videos. The video of his arrival and shooting of Senator Hoffman is truly chilling. Again, it's no exaggeration to say this is the stuff of nightmares. There's a photo of the firearms found in Boelter's abandoned SUV. Based on these crimes, we brought a federal complaint charging Boelter with an array of federal charges. Counts 1 and 2 charge him with stalking. Count 1 charges him with stalking Representative Melissa Hortman using interstate facilities. And that's
You were seeing some video at the end there of the manhunt, the largest manhunt in Minnesota history, the largest coordinated manhunt in Minnesota history. Went on for 2 days before Boelter was arrested again, facing charges with the state, 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder. The state prosecutors say they will also be pursuing first-degree murder charges that they hope a jury will indict him on. And then right at the end there, you heard from federal prosecutors talking about the federal charges, 6 total: stalking of Melissa Hortman, stalking of Mark Hortman, murder of Melissa Hortman, murder of Mark Hortman, shooting of the Hortmans, and the shooting of the Hoffmans. So 6 federal charges. And again, he is expected in federal court coming up at about 2:30. You probably know cameras not allowed inside a federal court, so we won't be able to bring that to you, and likely may not know what comes out of that hearing until after our hour here is over, but we'll certainly have updates on Fox 13 and Fox 35 later today. We are going to take a break here on Florida Live, but we'll be right back after this. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer. Thanks for joining us on this Monday afternoon. Over the past week, we commemorated and honored the 9th anniversary of the Pulse Nightclub shooting that killed 49 people and injured 53 others. And over the past few days, about 170 people, Pulse survivors and family members of victims who were killed in that shooting had the chance to walk through the old nightclub building before it's torn down. It's going to be taken down and replaced with a permanent memorial to those victims. Today, media had the chance to do so. Fox 35 sent Amy Kaufeldt and John Brown, who both covered the Pulse nightclub shooting in those early morning hours of June 12, 2016, had the chance to sit down with them this afternoon, had an extended conversation with them about what they saw and what they felt while walking through that building.
This is not an assignment that we looked forward to or really wanted. But I think that we walked in with the mentality, one, of a journalist, and that we are here to sort of document what we see in our mind, because we weren't allowed to have any types of recording devices, no phones, no cameras, no nothing. But I also went in as a human being who covered this story intensively for the last 9 years. And I think probably John and I both agree, the most difficult story that we have ever covered, not just working in Orlando, but really in our lifetime and our careers. One that probably had the largest impact on us emotionally. So I went into it also from the perspective as a mom, knowing that there were mothers that were in there that died, that there were children, that there were, people in there that happened to just go out that one night and didn't go home. And so I think that for both John and I think that, as parents too, it was just a very meaningful place for us to be able to witness that.
Yeah, it's funny you say, what do you take away from it a couple hours later? When I came back into the newsroom, people were in here and they were curious about what you saw. And I looked around the newsroom where we are. We have a temporary newsroom right now. And I looked at the size and I'm like, this is it. This is the size of the dance floor. Because in my mind, in your mind, you think of someplace so expansive, like you can't even see the other side of the club. It's that big. And then you get inside and you're like, wow. Everybody knew exactly what was going on immediately, because the two rooms we were shooting were just like this room and that room. It's like everything is together. And I think that's what has impacted me the most was over the past week, once we found out that we were going into the nightclub site. First of all, you start looking back on the old the 911 calls, because I wanted to hear those and then try and pick out where they were. And then also the soundbite from Mayor Dyer. I think Amy and I were on the air at the same time when we had heard a few people were dead. We had heard from some police sources saying, yeah, well, there's fatalities in here. And then we toss it to Dyer. He does a press conference, and somewhere in that press conference, and I don't think he had the exact number during that press conference, if I remember correctly, but it was nearly 50 dead. And I remember all of us on the desk just being like, are you kidding me?
I think
it was that moment.
We
wow.
looked at each other, and I remember that moment when he said 49.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking it was
right.
Don't you remember?
You said that. That can't be right.
That can't be right. That can't be right. Yeah.
Did he mean 9? I think you said something like, did he mean 9?
Yeah.
And then you're like, wow, 49. And then you go back here to the 911 calls. And then I went back and I actually looked at the diagrams, which Amy and I looked at after we toured it, just to see how it played out, the step by step, because I think it gives us a better perspective. And the one thing that keeps coming back to me is the chaos inside, because Amy kept saying, there's so many exits in here. I was under the impression, it's been 9 years since you were really, really involved in this, and I was under the impression that people just couldn't get out. And then you're in there and you realize there were exits. But because of the chaos, you just run away from the gunfire, and some people ran to the quote-unquote wrong area. Now, it's not their fault, but you just want to get away from the gunfire, and by doing that, they ran to an area where they were going to be trapped. And that really hits you in the pit of the stomach there, is that they may have survived for a while. This went for 3 hours. That's the other thing. This is a small space. And you think of being in a small space like that with a madman shooter for 3 hours, that makes me ill.
And some of them, as you know, spoke to him, right? Especially in the bathroom, because some of the folks that were trapped in the bathroom, they were trapped with the shooter and spoke to him. And during that time, he's making 911 calls. And I think that we read that he spoke to dispatchers 3 times.
Yeah.
And when they asked him, why, what's your motivation? I mean, he told them, he said, I am here I'm part of the Islamic State. He went in there with terrorist intentions. I don't think we still know clearly whether or not that he had any intention of going in there with the mind of that he knew that this was even an LGBTQ nightclub. I think that he truly went in with the idea of mass casualty, because he was, as we know now, out plotting places where he could go.
I remember he went to Disney, right?
He went to Disney Springs.
A month before,
Yeah, because I think looking for places where he could maximize the number of people he could hurt. And I think that, can you imagine being in a bathroom trapped with an assassin, a shooter, and you're hearing these conversations, and so many of them were trying to be quiet or playing dead. It was really shocking.
Yeah, you talked about the inflicting the maximum amount of casualties in a short amount of time. It was 200 rounds fired in just a matter of minutes. And so I'm just.
Yeah, and that's so they haven't touched the nightclub since the investigation was over. It's just sat there, and so Amy and I were just looking around. There's bullet holes here, bullet holes there, but when you say it's untouched, like the TVs are still on the wall, the LED neon lights are still in the ceiling. So other than them picking up the floor, it is how it was that night.
Yeah.
Talk about that, about kind of walking in and just kind of walk us through what you did see and what's going through your mind as you are taking in and seeing those bullet holes and kind of experiencing that.
So I think you walk in, we went into the main entrance, and the first thing you see is the cash register is still sitting on the counter where they were collecting money.
Old cash register.
Yeah, old cash
it's like
register.
a 1970s thing.
There's a safe right behind the cash register that they probably used once they got to a certain amount of money in the register. They would put money in the safe. There's an ATM machine that's still there right inside the door, and right above the ATM is a poster of the next event at the club.
I was trying to find that
it was
picture
really popular.
too.
They would have drag shows and that kind of thing. And it was a show coming up on June 18th with Lila Starr. And John actually
I had found it
the
earlier. And
June 18th of
June 18th.
Yeah. So 2 days later.
2 days later. So that was the first, right in the entryway.
Yeah.
And then John and I immediately went to the main dance floor area. And I think what strikes you is that it's a wooden dance floor, and the wood on the floor has been pulled up. And whether or not the scraping on the floor, John, I don't know what you thought, if the scraping was as a result of them pulling up the dance floor, or the scraping was just with the original. I can't imagine the concrete looked like that.
No, well, that may have been underneath because it did have an overlay, but I also didn't understand if, when they were, what it might have destroyed it, or, I mean, it's going to sound crass, but if it was so bloodstained, they had to just get that part up, because that's where the 22 people that we know of are right there on the dance floor. And so that's the only really thing that changed, as far as I saw.
So that dance floor was missing. But as you mentioned, a lot of it was still, everything was still, for the most part, the bars were still there. There was a couple things that had been added that John and I noticed. On the main bar area next to the dance floor, there was a sort of a wooden, I don't know what you would call it, almost looked like a large wooden tray, and it said hashtag hugs not hate. That appeared to have been added after the shootings happened. And then on the outside patio, John and I walked out onto the patio, and there's a cross behind the bar on the patio, and a cross that had angel wings on it, and it said 49 with a little rainbow in the middle of that. Those are the only two things that I think I saw that would have been added after the fact. And then there was another room, and we learned about this afterwards. There's a room where I think that some of the performers would get ready. It had, like dressing room, dressing room, and it had like dressing room lights, and there was a little laundry area in there. That was the only room that I really noticed kind of a foul odor coming from that room. But we were told that there were people, I think 8 people hiding in that room that they were able to get out. That was actually close to one of the exits.
Yeah, it was, and there was an exit right next to it. Practically, they had gone in there, and I think that's when the police took out the window air conditioning unit, were able to pull it out. I don't know how people got out the size of a window air conditioning unit and through there. But yeah, that was kind of towards the back of the building. When I first walked in, because I had just gone over I traced his steps, and so we know he went in, and they think he went to the bar and just surveyed the area. Went out, got his weapon. He went to an auto dealer next door, not an auto dealer, but
a window.
It may have been that one, So he was close by. So he walked by everybody, saw them all and walked right back in. And when you walk in, he went to the right, and it's not a long hallway. It's just, he's right in. So nobody could have stopped. Like, it's not like there was a big entrance and there's no entrance. You just walk in, there's a little room, and then you're right into the dance floor. And so those are the people, and that's where the gunfire happened first. And there's a bar in there, but then methodically going back and forth between the two rooms. And when you look at, and that's what when they asked me about that previously about the size of the room, which is that room in there, 22 people's bodies. I mean, that's a small space with a lot of people. And you talk about pure evil. This is somebody stepping over bodies. People are still, and this is the other thing I think stuck out to me is, you put these things in a vacuum. You think, was it quiet? Was it, there had to be screaming. The music was probably still playing. If the music was on, it's probably still going. And I saw where he had shot through a wall and it broke a water pipe. So there was water spraying. And you talk about chaos. It had to be absolute chaos in there. And you do lose your orientation, I'm sure. And that's, people are just running. But to think of everything going on in there, and this guy is still calm enough to call police and say whatever he said.
Calm.
So calm.
So calm.
And I mean, that is a picture of evil as far as I'm concerned.
Now, we spoke for more than half an hour about that. I'm not going to play that entire conversation for you here, but we will have it up shortly on fox35orlando.com and Fox Local if you would like to see more of it. We are going to take a break here on Florida Live, but we will be right back. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Monday afternoon live on Fox Local and on YouTube. Today, for the first time, we had several of the principals from the Orlando Dreamers making a public appearance together. This was the owner, Dr. Rick Workman. This was Barry Larkin, the MLB ambassador. This was Jim Schnorf, the co-founder of the Dreamers, and also the chief operating officer. John Morgan, who was listed as the co-owner, was also supposed to be there, but apparently something had come up at the last minute, and he did not show up at the event. But today they talked about joining the push to bring Major League Baseball to Orlando and kind of where things go from here. Interesting conversation. Take a listen.
So I grew up in a small town about 100 miles east of St. Louis. At age 4, sitting on the porch swing with my grandparents listening to Harry Carey and Jack Buck to the games for the Cardinals. And in that area, baseball is really close to a religion. It really is. My wife happens to be from St. Louis. We moved down here part-time in 04, full-time in 08. My daughters just graduated from the University of Florida. They went through K through there, and now they're going to grad school at Rollins and UCF. We love baseball. I think we have a very good understanding of, as Barry mentioned, how baseball builds a community. It brings all aspects of a community together. I've got goosebumps now because I've had a chance to see some cool things along the way as a spectator. You were on the field, I can only imagine. But we all come from all walks of life, but when you're in those stands and you're cheering together, buying the same, either the white towels or the red towels or whatever color towels, and you're having fun before, during, and after, there's nothing like that. I never dreamed I'd have that opportunity, but I had a chance to meet Jim and Pat, I think pre-pandemic. And along that way, I said, you know what, you can count me out for something. And God bless America, as things have transpired with Heartland Dental, the opportunity for me to do more came up. And then really just in the past 3, maybe 4 months, it kind of fell into place, or coalesced is the word, that said, if you could do this, you'd be considered the lead owner. And I go, I'll do that if that is what it takes to get baseball here in Orlando, because our community will never be the same if that happens. I really believe that with all of my heart.
And Dr. Workman, a quick follow-up. I'm going to really have to put you on the spot on this very serious question. So who are you rooting for when the Cardinals play the Dreamers in the World Series?
I will be for the Dreamers, but it'll be a great day. What a fantasy that'd be, right?
No, you know, the thing about this, and I really think what's interesting about this is the fact that it's not just about a relocation of a team that's struggling. You know, one of the things that we wanted to show Major League Baseball was we don't want to be a default. We don't want to win because somebody else loses, right? I personally believe that Tampa and the fans down in Tampa, they deserve their major league team. If they can't work it out, okay. But we don't want to be the reason that they can't work it out. We don't want that. That has always been our message, right? But we certainly are here, as I said before, as a solution for Major League Baseball. If they can't work it out, that's fine. If there is a team that can't figure out their stadium financing and they look for another home, we're here for that as well. And as you mentioned, Major League Baseball has stated that they want to add 2 teams, an East Coast and a West Coast team, and they want to realign the divisions, right? There's an American League and a National League. There's 30 teams in Major League Baseball right now, right? They want to have 15 on each side. They want to have 16 teams on each side. That's going to cause for some realignments of teams. I was just talking to a gentleman at my table today. His Houston Astros used to be in the National League Central, and we used to have this back and forth, me being a Cincinnati Red and his team being the Houston Astros. We used to beat them all the time, by the way. I have the mic. Now the Houston Astros are in the American League, and they've been very successful, by the way. We haven't been so much in Cincinnati. So yeah, so there are opportunities for us. It's not just a one and done type of situation. If the thing that happens down in Tampa doesn't come our way, it doesn't mean that this is over, right? There are many, many opportunities for us to be successful.
I think it may be the ultimate level up. I mean, a rising tide raises all boats. If you've got a stadium event, I mean, the stadium would be a 365-day-a-year event. You got baseball, 81 days a year there, maybe spring training elsewhere here in Orlando. But there's the expectation there'll be a 5,000 to 10,000 person concert venue or performance venue, however you want to call that, where artists could come, maybe have a residency, could be used in conjunction with anything that the convention center does here. All of those aspects will cause more hotel rooms to be used, more meals to be purchased here on International Drive and other places. I think it helps our city in innumerable ways that are maybe not as concrete as one could express, but I think you all can figure that out. And if I can be a part of that, I've committed to this to the team and the team over there, all of us together, and it's going to take the support of all of you all also. If we can get this done, I think it'll be fantastic for this city. I really do. I believe that.
And Dr. Workman, I believe you were telling me earlier you want this to be a 365-day-a-year attraction, and you've already had conversations with the National Baseball Hall of Fame to have the second largest baseball memorabilia and museum right here in Orlando, and that's not even including the special Barry Larkin wing and exhibit, right?
We'd have to have a different budget for that, I think. But now think about that. The Hall of Fame is not easy to get to today. Think of all the attractions in Orlando, all the attractions here on iDrive. Think about moms and dads taking their children to that. There's a million things to do. I can't imagine how and why one wouldn't want to go visit a baseball thing. I could see 1,000, 2,000 people a day going through there. Now that doesn't change the whole calculus of everything, but it's an example of the things that can get done and would get done in the nature of somewhat of a ballpark village, which is also a big, important aspect to any Major League franchise today.
I am confident that you're going to see the public side of this puzzle successfully completed very quickly.
So, Jim, really it just comes down to a simple statement of support or a non-binding agreement stating that Orange County is interested in exploring bringing Major League Baseball to our community, right?
That's what we need right now. The clock is ticking. It's very clear. I think there'll be a lot of things happening in the next 30 to 60 days in Major League Baseball, and there would be an all-powerful message to be able to tell Major League Baseball, yes, we have this final box checked. There is going to be an appropriate public-private partnership.
And Dr. Workman, some people are asking, why don't you just call Tampa Bay Rays owner Steve Sternberg and buy the team? Is that realistic?
We have done research, I promise you, on this. I think the thing that Barry and Jim have said about the discipline and methodology, you know what I'm saying, approach. Now I'm laughing at myself. We have to work in concert with Major League Baseball. At the end of the day, they have to approve any transfer of ownership and any awarding of a franchise. And so we're working behind the scenes. In typical business, certainly you just call them up, say, hey, what's happening? But our advice to this point is not to do that yet. But as Jim, I think, has said, we hope in the next coming few weeks we'll have a better visibility on that.
So again, and it said maybe some motion in the next couple of weeks that could give us a little bit better of an idea of kind of where things are headed. Again, that was at the iDrive Chamber of Commerce luncheon going on, and Fox 35's Randy Hildreth is speaking one-on-one with Dr. Rick Workman, the owner in this, who is principal, the anchor investor, I believe they call him as well. So we'll have more on this coming up later. We are going to take a break here on Florida Live, but we'll be right back. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Monday afternoon, live on Fox Local and on YouTube. A big trade over the weekend for the Orlando Magic, picking up Desmond Bane from the Memphis Grizzlies in exchange for Cole Anthony, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and first-round draft picks over several years. This afternoon, we had the chance to hear from Jeff Weltman, who's the president of basketball operations for the Magic, to talk about why they made this trade, how it came about, and what it means for the team.
We've valued him very highly for a while, and there are a few guys in the league that you kind of agree with our little crew that if they become available, you're going to be aggressive. And when I stood here in front of you guys after the season, I honestly didn't expect him to be, available in these conversations, but when we learned about that, as we kind of did our laps around the league, we shifted gears and made it a priority for us.
How quickly did this come together? When did you learn that he was potentially available, and how long did this take?
Well, I don't want to get too deep into conversations that I feel are best kept private, but it took a little time. It wasn't a quick hitter.
When you look at what Desmond can bring to this team, how many of those kind of boxes? You mentioned he's a player that you guys kind of universally agreed was that you should chase if he became available. But how many of those boxes does he check?
I mean, the guy is almost the player you would design if you could start from scratch. Because obviously we've spoken a lot about our need for shooting, but we've also talked about playmaking, and I've talked about adding skill. And Desmond is such a unique player because he's one of the best shooters in the NBA, but he's also a gifted playmaker, and he generates shot creation for himself and for others. He creates advantages with and without the ball. High IQ player. So he's a very unique player. He kind of is one of the 90th plus percentile wings for putting him into guard actions. And he operates those actions at high frequency and high efficiency. So he checks every box, and then you want to talk about the other end of the floor. The guy's tough, he's physical, he's locked in every night. He's kind of one of those guys I feel that coaches know exactly what they're going to get from every night, and just monster competitor at the highest level. I kind of think of him as like just an old school tough guy,
Do you have any sort of previous relationship with him at some point?
No, I don't. But I can tell you that part of what we all do in this league is we compile data. We make it our business. Every team does, to gather as much intel on every player. Especially if staffs change over or players switch teams. And I can just tell you that there aren't too many people that I think the league regards as highly in their locker room, in their organization, in practice, as Desmond Bane. He's by all accounts just one of those rare guys that is going to, I believe, impact our team in every possible way.
Jeff, you see 4 first-round picks. I think there's some sticker shock with that. How do you assess, or how do you assign value to those picks when you're doing a deal like this?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, because I think that obviously we don't know what the value of those picks are, right? They're future picks, and that's up to us to determine what the value of those picks are. So obviously the one that we do know is this year, 16, and clearly part of us taking the temperature of this trade was our feelings about 16, so we have to bake that into how we look at the overall package. And then going forward, 3 of the remaining picks are under our control. So, we feel that we're betting on ourselves. We feel like we're going to be a good team. We feel that, the other unique thing about a guy like Dez being available to obtain in a trade is the fact that he's just about to turn 27. And so if we are a good team, then we hope to be a good team for a while, because, our age profile is that our, most highly paid, kind of core 4 players are ages 23 to 27. So, hopefully we can come to an agreement with Paolo this summer. We'll be having those conversations shortly, and have this group together for a long time wearing Magic uniforms. So that obviously will determine what the value of those picks are. And some of this is what the NBA is about, right? It's betting on yourself. It's putting pressure on yourself. It's elevating your standard. I will say that one of the unique things about this trade, when you think about the caliber of a player that Desmond Bane is at the age that he's at, and with the contract control that you have, is that we gave up none of our own core pieces. So this was by definition going to be, a draft capital trade.
When you look at the puzzle, how many of the pieces do you feel like you have? Are you set? You're complete? Or are there still some moves coming?
Well, the other part of the math for the draft outlook was we still have 25, so we're still in this draft, and obviously we need to round out our roster. So we have work to do for the next week and a half. We need to plan our free agency. We need to go through the draft process and augment the roster where we can. We still think there are places where we hope to get better, but I think this is a huge impact to our team.
You mentioned the kind of salary cap realities come for everyone.
Yeah.
And doing this, you definitely invited in a little bit.
Yeah.
What considerations were that kind of in, and what was the conversation with the DeVos family about making this move and potentially dipping more than just a toe into those waters?
Yeah, no, you're right. We put our foot on the gas here. So as I've always said, like that train is coming for everybody, and we probably skipped a station here. I hope that our team is good enough to merit where the finances will take us. But I've told you guys that the DeVosses are committed to this team, and man, you talk about like showing that. The DeVos family wants to give the city a so badly, and this trade is proof of that.
Jeff, we were here about a year ago when you just signed Contavious Caldwell-Pope.
Yep.
Obviously, you have to give something to get something. But what do you think changed with his role description for this team in the future?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not following. Were you with KCP?
When you signed him a year ago,
yeah.
I think you viewed him as the piece for the short-term future. It was a 3-year deal, and now he's not on the Magic.
Yeah.
So what, in that lens, what changed for his role, I guess?
I think Kenny's game is dependent upon others offensively. He's not a guy that creates his own shot. That's not who he is. And so I think like the injuries to Franz and Paolo and Jalen are 3 shot creators. Really upended our whole offense, and that's why I've always said it's not just Kenny. Our whole team struggled to shoot. We did not get the same quality of shots that we had gotten the year before. And so obviously, look, none of this matters if your team isn't healthy. None of it. So if we had health last year, I think Kenny would have been the guy he's been for his whole career. Kenny's a hell of a player, and I think adding a guy like Dez will give us like an elite level shooter, but also a guy that's a playmaker, a guy that has behind John Morant ran more pick and rolls for anybody on the Grizzlies, and so to have that guy that'd be able to put pressure off the dribble, another guy, and hopefully Jalen additionally, we get excited about that.
You touched on it a little bit, but how much does your draft philosophy change now that you just have the 25 and then the second round as well?
I don't know if it changes. I think we have to go through the process. Obviously our roster's changed, so maybe from that perspective we may have to recalibrate the needs and how we want to fill up the positional needs that we have. But I don't think our draft philosophy changes. 25 is obviously a later first round pick, but I think we were looking at some interesting guys that we're starting to get our arms around a little bit, and we're excited about that pick.
It was certainly a big cost, that trading away all those picks. Is it an overpay? We talked about that with Sean Green, independent reporter, earlier on Fox 35 News Plus. You can watch that full interview online. We're going to take a break here on Florida Live, but we'll be right back. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Monday afternoon. It is time now for our Tampa Connection, and for that we go to Fox 13 Tampa Bay and digital content producer Nancy Gay. Nancy, good to talk to you this afternoon.
It's good to talk to you as well, Garrett. We just got a hold of an FWC search warrant, and we are now learning a little bit more about what happened the night of the deadly Clearwater ferry crash. Now, this is the crash that happened on April 27th, and Jeff Knight, who used to own Janice Live, crashed his boat into the back of the Clearwater ferry. Now, this crash killed 1 person and injured 10 others. Now, according to this search warrant, after the crash, Knight did do a breathalyzer test. Now, this is nothing new. We have been told that his results came back as 0. However, according to this search warrant, Knight refused to take a drug test. Now, the search warrant also says that an officer who had a brief encounter with Knight felt that nothing indicated that Knight was under the influence at that moment. Now, this search warrant also states that people on board Knight's boat, what they had to say about the incident, multiple female passengers said that Knight panicked after the crash, and he kept saying that his life is over and that he's going to lose everything. Now, the search warrant also alleges that when women called 911, Knight kept telling them to hang up and to not say anything. Now, previously, Knight claimed that he had left the scene of the crash because his own boat was taking on water, but this search warrant seems to negate those claims somewhat. One woman on board the boat told investigators that she did not remember her feet getting wet that night. Another woman said she could see some water coming in at the corners, but the water was not in the middle of the boat. Now, while driving away from the ferry, this search warrant alleges that Knight actually passed several sheriff's boats with their lights on that were heading to the ferry as he was driving away. However, he did nothing to flag them down. Now, in response to the warrant, Knight's attorney issued a statement saying that authorities had possession of the vessel since the night of the incident when he voluntarily handed it over to them, and any data will confirm what he said all along. Now, it is important to note that as of right now, Knight has not been charged with anything. Garrett?
A lot of interesting new details from that search warrant, Nancy. Story number 2 here, and that is some former workers for Silver Airways looking for those paychecks.
Yeah, so Silver Airways, they abruptly shut down last Wednesday. And not only did this leave travelers scrambling, it left employees wondering what happened and what happened to their last paycheck. Now, we spoke with one employee who worked for the airline for 19 years. Thomas Durr said he and his coworkers received an email from the CEO, which says, in part, it is with a heavy heart that I share difficult news that after months of navigating through Chapter 11 bankruptcy, our journey at Silver Airways is coming to an end for most of us. Now, it goes on to say, I know this is not the outcome any of us wanted, and I deeply regret the impact this will have on all of you. Now, Durr has a 5-year-old as well as an 8-month-old, and he was absolutely shocked by the news. He said that employees did not receive any communication and that he reached out to Human Resources but got nothing. He added that the employees only received 1 week of pay for working 3 weeks and that he hopes the airlines will find the money to give every employee their final paycheck. Fox 13 did reach out to Silver Airways to learn more about how they plan to pay their employees for the unpaid work, but we're still waiting to hear back. Garrett?
Gosh, a tough situation for many of those workers and their families, that's for sure. Meanwhile, story number 3 today, and that is the start of scallop season.
Yes, this is personally one of my favorite times of the year. Scallop season officially began in Florida yesterday, and it does run through September 24th, depending on which zone you are in. It did begin yesterday for the Swanee River zone. Now, locally here in the Bay Area, scallop season begins in Citrus and Hernando counties on July 1st and runs through September 24th. And in Pasco County, scalloping begins on July 10th and runs through August 18th. Now, if you are planning on going scalloping up in St. Joseph Bay as well as in Gulf County, you'll have to wait until August 16th. Now, there is a daily bag limit in many zones, and how many you can snag depends on the time of year as well, but there is no minimum size limit. Now, these scallops can be collected by hand or with a landing or dip net. Commercial harvesting is prohibited during the recreational scallop season. And it is important to note that recreational harvesters do need a Florida saltwater fishing license to harvest bay scallops unless they are exempt. And some of the people who are exempt include those who are under the age of 16, those who are over the age of 65, who are disabled, and who are in the military, who may be visiting the area for about 30 days or less. Those are just some of the people who are exempt. But also, if you have a no-cost shoreline fishing license and are waiting from the shore to collect scallops, you do not need a separate Florida saltwater fishing license. Now, so this means that your feet do not leave the bottom to swim, snorkel, or scuba. It is important to note that harvesters who do not use a vessel to reach or return their scallop location also do not need a separate license. Garrett?
All right, and finally here, got about 30 seconds left, Nancy, but tell us about this special visitor to a Tampa hospital.
Yes, so this actually happened in South Florida. It did not happen in Tampa. Taylor Swift visited children at Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital. That is, again, down in South Florida near Miami. Now, she posed for photos and handed out signed copies of her book. The visit was shared on the hospital's social media accounts, and the caption read, "You made this a day we'll never shake off. Thank you, Taylor, for bringing your support and kindness to Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital. You turned hospital hallways into a place of joy, comfort, and connection." Garrett?
Yeah, how exciting is that? I'm sure that brightened a lot of their days. Fox 13 digital content producer Nancy Gay, we appreciate you joining us.